if you have no money, you're looking for essentials, and the essentials don't become non-essential just because you add more money.
Fair.
I just kind of made that up, and I think that that's actually really true.
That sounded smart.
It sounded really smart. Cool. Let's ride with that one. Welcome back, team. Another episode this week with Drew and Alex, and no guests, just the two of us. We are. This is going to be a one-on-one episode,
Just the two of us.
just the two of us. So today, a little bit different. We're not necessarily talking about a well, I guess it is a training topic, but one of the things we know is on a lot of people's minds is if I have X amount of dollars, what fitness equipment should I buy? Basically, people looking to build out a home gym, or I guess in a military setting, you might have some units looking to just acquire some stuff and might be curious as to our opinions. So, what we've done here is created a couple of different categories. We've got less than $100, 100 to $500, 500 to $1,000, and then over $1,000. Obviously, there's some fluidity here, and we'll have conversations towards the end about things like used equipment, gyms closing down, DIY stuff. That all factors into this. Anybody at any point, anywhere can get creative with how they acquire gym equipment. But what we wanted to do was just kind of start a conversation around, for example, if I had $100, where would I go? If I had $400, what would I look to add to that? And so on and so forth.
Yeah. This is like a random tangent. It probably belongs at the end of the episode, but I'm putting it in the front of the episode. Regardless of like what we like on this list, a huge factor is like, do you like training that way? And are you actually going to use it? Because I think there's nobody has the actual numbers on this, but I am quite sure that the vast majority of home gym equipment just gathers dust. People buy it. It's a great piece of equipment. They could do a ton of things with it, but it's not really their style. It's not really fun for them. So it sits in a corner. And one day it ends up on Facebook Marketplace where one of us can get it and use it all the time. Like whether we think it's the ultimate piece of equipment, I mean, I think our opinions matter. That's why we shot them into the internet on a podcast. But they don't really matter to you because you got to live your life. Pick stuff that you actually like.
Right. And I mean, case in point, I'm thinking back of during COVID, you almost had this like rise of, this is going to sound really bad as I phrase this, but like home gym porn, where people are just like all over Instagram. You start to see these really fancy home gyms, and that's great. But to your point, if you're a triathlete, your setup at home is going to look very different than if you're a power lifter.
I'm realizing as you said that we did not put like a trainer for a bike on this list of
Right,
things.
exactly. And so I think both of us sort of came into this thinking, what is just sort of a basic gym setup look like if you're primarily interested in kind of resistance training stuff, but you may want to get into some of the more hybrid things and you're interested in cardio. Basically, I mean, CrossFit maybe is a way to phrase it. And towards the end, um, I think each of us can kind of talk about what we have in our home gyms for what it's worth. But to kick things off, I'll turn it over to you for the sub $100.
At the top of this list
It's
is
not
an
a lot of
item.
money. Not a lot of money.
No, it's not much, but I think the first item on here is something you're going to see in a lot of home gyms. I think Drew and I have both at various points followed some Pavel Tsatsouline type programs. And if anybody here has done Simple and Sinister or things like that, you will totally understand where we're coming from. You could get pretty solid, full body, strength oriented, condition oriented workouts with one or two kettlebells as your total solution for fitness. So kettlebell coming in pretty high on this list in terms of bang for your buck. You can totally get a decent size, decent quality kettlebell for less than $100.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I just
All
Googled
right.
it. You can get a Rogue. You can get a 24 kilo, which is 53 pounds, Rogue kettlebell for 85 bucks.
There you go.
I mean, that in and of itself, you know, you could do just about anything ish with just that. So kettlebells, I mean, do you want me to go piece by piece or just sort of rattle them off and then have a discussion about them? You
I was
choose.
thinking we like pick each one and have a little chat about it. As you can tell,
Okay.
listeners at home, we are completely winging this. There's not a whole lot of plan here.
No, we just have a list in front of us. And I made a note on this with the sub $100 and maybe even into the 100 to 500 category. What you're looking for is multi-use equipment. So
Yes.
things that can do more than one thing. Some of you guys may be shouting from your rooftops that some sort of pulley setup or rack thing is under, like, great, but like I'm looking for stuff that is mobile and can do many things, like a kettlebell, for example. You can swing it, squat it, push it, flip it, carry it. So along those same lines, one of the things we have on here is a sandbag. And actually, I'll put med ball in that same kind of category in terms of things you can very cheaply find and or create using stuff that you already have around your house. And I know we'll mention some more DIY stuff later, but I have made sandbags using a duffel bag and some sand, and med balls as well. Similar sort of thing, but you can get really expensive ones. You don't need them. You can make it yourself for cheap.
I have seen just like a couple bags full of dirt wrapped in a ton of duct tape. Boom, you have a sandbag and or a med ball, depending on the size. You made it pretty straightforward. We will in the next price category come back to fancier sandbag options, but at the low end, you can absolutely make DIY solution versions of those that are pretty fantastic. I know we're already going out of order here, which threw me off, Drew. I'm gonna put one in here that again is a like low end affordable version of something you could spend much, much more money on. We'll hear it towards the end of the episode. But lots of people like cable style training. Cable machines are really expensive. You can just go to the hardware store and get one of those little like hook on or carabiner on pulley kind of things and either run some like cordelette kind of stuff or some metal wire cable stuff if you want to use fancier stuff. There's some, if you like, all you really need at the end is like a big washer, but if you really want to get fancy, you can get like a clip-on piece and you're still probably $100, under $100. And you can hook that onto a beam. You can hook it onto a squat rack if you have one.
Tree.
Boom, you've got a cable machine. Yeah, a tree branch, whatever, instant cable machine. Pretty straightforward. I actually remember during that weird deep COVID ACFT just came out time frame, I found
Andy.
myself at Fort, yeah, right. I found myself at Fort Jackson where basic training was, and there was this like whole like how do we train people for resistancy stuff? All we have are pull-up bar pods. We actually started like a bunch of drill sergeants were DIYing stuff. They did do some DIY med balls, but they did some DIY cable machines that you just like loop over a pull-up bar and you're off to the races. You're doing cable training.
Boom. Similar vein, you've got bands on here. I would agree with that. I think bands you can get relatively cheaply. Typically, I think in my experience, the thicker they get, i.e., the heavier they get, the more expensive they are. But you can also buy them as a set.
Hmm.
Um, so bands are great. While I'm here, I'll also mention one that's near and dear to my heart, which is just a DIY pull-up bar. I've made many of these. Effectively, go to Home Depot, go to Lowe's, not sponsored by either one of those. Buy a piece of pipe and then either attach it to some trees or shove some 2x4s into the ground and away you go. Tree branches work great for pull-ups too, but I think talking about spending very little money and getting a massive bang for your buck, something like a DIY pull-up bar goes a long way.
Hell yeah. I think we've talked enough about like DIY stuff here that I'm just going to bring a shout out we were going to save for the end up to the top of the episode. This was huge during COVID, but End of Three Fitness, EO3 Fitness, they have a page on their website called the DIY Corner, and it's got a lot of great instructions and templates for making your own just about anything you could want. They've got a great one where you use like two Home Depot buckets, some concrete, and a few like two by fours to make some squat stands that are pretty solid, pretty stable. Templates you can use to make a plyo box that are pretty solid. I should probably stop talking because I'm mentioning other pieces of equipment we're going to mention later on this list. But there's a lot of ways to DIY a lot of things, and they've got some awesome instructions for it.
I made a, I know we'll talk more DIY later probably, but I made DIY gymnastics rings.
Yeah.
Filled them with somebody, fill them with sand, put them in the oven until they're pliable, and then bend them. It was the
When you say
jankiest,
them, you're talking PVC
the
pipe.
PVC pipe in your oven and bend
Huh.
them. It was the jankiest thing I've ever done. And I don't really remember if it worked all that well, but I felt cool.
Huh. Gymnastics rings are
Um,
not that expensive. Actually,
I
since you
know,
mention
but
it,
I thought I was
not on our
cool.
list, not on our list, but Amazon gymnastics rings with straps, definitely under $100.
Yeah,
At my previous house, I had an elevated deck, so I just hung them from the bottom of the deck. Boom,
boom,
you got
done.
an awesome training tool.
You've got you've got the Sornex glute ham roller on here. Talk to me.
Yeah, not a lot of things on this list have a brand name attached to them. This is a personal favorite of mine. Since we're talking about Sorinex, and it is today, gonna throw out an RIP, Rich Soren, Papa Soren. I'm not a huge Sorinex bro. Sorry, guys, but that's a huge legacy in the strength and conditioning space. So respect. Many companies make glute ham rollers. I think Sorinex's proprietary one might actually be just above $100 if you're buying it new. So maybe it belongs in the next category. But Sorinex makes an absolutely brilliant glute ham roller, extremely well built, extremely versatile. I know it's called a glute ham roller, but you can actually do a million different things with it. You could do upper body, lower body core stuff with it. Great way to like add in some lateral lunge kind of work on a really cool setup. As long as you have a good floor to use it on, you're good to go. Just really fantastic piece of equipment.
I'm glad you mentioned all the other things you could do with it because I just imagined you spending $100 on something that does one thing. So that's good to know.
There's actually some great YouTube videos breaking down other ways to use it.
I added this one on here as we were talking. It's actually free and it is a rock. This is coming from somebody who enjoys lifting stones and having gone to Scotland and lifted stones. I think there's a lot to be said. Johnny McAshee, shout out, guest of the or a friend of the pod, another stone lifter. You can do a lot of things with a heavy rock, and typically you can find them lying around where you live. And if it's heavy enough for you to pick it up and move it, then just take it into your garage, and now you've got a piece of equipment. So
Do you remember,
a
does
rock.
the name Hobie Call mean anything to you?
No, it's a cool name though.
Back in the day, he was a dominant Spartan race champion. Absolutely crushed the field. Super skinny guy, but could get to work on some like manual labor, drag a rock kind of tasks. And he absolutely loved just like finding rocks in the woods
Yeah,
and doing hard stuff with them a lot. Like pick it up, run with it for a few miles, do like squat throws with the rock, and then like burpee your way to it, and then do another squat throw. Just savage workouts that were based mostly on running and messing with a rock.
there you go. See, we had that conversation a while back. Stick or a rock. I think in this case, I'll take a rock.
Ooh, rock's gaining now that you make that point, but a
There
stick
you
could be
go.
a pull-up bar positioned in the
I
right way.
mean, yeah, it's a big stick. Maybe.
Listen, all the best sticks are big sticks.
Jesus.
Final, final item in the less than $100 category. We're probably forgetting lots of things that are less than
I'm sure we
$100.
are. People are gonna
Yeah,
blow us up for forgetting stuff.
for sure. Maybe I'll make this like an Instagram post with each of the
Yeah,
categories and a bunch of pictures. People can, because like nobody yells at me after a podcast, but people will yell at me after an Instagram post if they disagree with it.
there you go.
So final item in this category, landmine can be a landmine attachment, can be a standalone landmine thing. I'm not talking about going to your military surplus store and finding like an actual landmine. Talking about the little attachment that you put the barbell into, and now it's like on a hinge. Absolutely fantastic. Lets you opens up a bunch of new ways to use a barbell. So the landmine by itself, kind of useless. I
I was
gotcha.
about to
But
say, I was gonna push back at you on this because it doesn't do anything
listen,
unless you have a
listen.
barbell, which is
I
more than
know,
$100.
but if you do have a barbell, the
Okay,
landmine like
if you have other
doubles the
things,
utility of that thing.
no, I see what you're getting at. Um, so
I'll put an
to
asterisk on landmine
there
because
you
it's an
go.
accessory
Asterisk is an
to a higher
accessory.
dollar value piece of equipment. That's
So
fine.
if you only have $100 and you want to get fit, I guess maybe at the end of each category, we'll do kind of our biggest bang for the buck. I would say kettlebell.
Yeah, it's hard to beat a kettlebell. There's I already mentioned Pavel, but like if you haven't gone down the kettlebell rabbit hole and like learned to kettlebell snatch, learned a bunch of fun kettlebell complexes, some double kettlebell stuff, like
It's cool.
it's good for way more than just the kettlebell swings you're
I
currently
mean, look
doing.
up. I think one of the hardest athletic events out there that does not get enough credit is
Hmm.
kettlebell long cycle, which for
Yep.
folks that don't know, it is 30 minutes of unbroken 24 kilo in each hand kettlebell clean and press. 30 minutes. Like go try to do a clean and press with one 24 kilo kettlebell and tell me how that feels. Then add another one and multiply it for half an hour. So point being, you can do some insane shit with
Before we
two
move on with that
chunks of
one,
metal.
shout outs to two additional things. One, I think he was a major. It feels like a major thing to do, but some Army officer wrote an article a while back about how kettlebell long cycle should be the Army's fitness test. I
Yeah.
don't, I mean, I don't agree. I think it's way too specialized,
It's also too
but
Russian. It's way too Russian
it's
for the American
dramatically
market.
too Russian. Yeah, it's not in the
Not
nature of
not a
freedom and
fan.
stuff.
No.
But Drew mentioned kettlebell long cycle competition style. I will also mention the Strong First Level One snatch test. That thing
Oh,
is a beast.
or the Secret Service
Your heart
snatch
will be
test.
exploding.
Yeah. Maybe we should scratch that itch. We should do some kettlebell stuff on the pod.
Ooh. You could work some like gnarly kettlebell sessions into long and strong coming up.
I should. Maybe we'll do a kettlebell cycle.
I like that.
Maybe we will. For folks that don't do it, that don't do long and strong, right now we're training for a one rep deadlift into a mile for time. So that's, I mean, that's kind of craziness we're doing. Hop on board. Um,
Oh yeah.
so that's $100. Caveat to all of these, I'm sure we're missing a lot of things. So sorry. The next category is 100 to $500. If you have between 100 and $500 and you have an empty garage and want to build a gym, here is what you should buy. I'll let you lead it off.
Sandbags actually on the list again. Drew thinks I'm crazy for listing sandbags that are over $100, but there are some like fancy sandbags that can open up a lot of cool modalities of training and stuff. And I'm putting kind of two categories on here. One, I'm putting like the really rugged, professional looking big sandbags that you can do for like 100 pounds, 150 pounds, 200 pounds, like bigger stuff. Start to mess with some carries, start to mess with some ground to shoulder stuff. You can even do sandbag get ups if you want to really suffer. But I'm also talking about another variety of sandbags. You see them in a lot of military gyms lately. They got popular. The sandbags with handles, and like choose carefully because some are better than others and have handles at appropriate positions and stay symmetrical when you flop on the floor and things like that. One of my all time favorite just like grunt work sessions is like a bear crawl sandbag combo where you are in a bear crawl position and you like sling that sandbag forward across the floor as far as it'll go and bear crawl to wherever it gets to and just keep on repeating that all the way across the room. Pretty gnarly, good time.
I am sad to have to say this, but we've got TRX on here. You would think that this would be the under $100
Especially because of its
category.
origins.
Right.
It was literally created by a guy deployed with just webbing.
In a submarine
Yeah.
as a SEAL. But here we are, TRX, $290. I didn't know that until
Nuts.
I Googled it for
It
this.
does come with like a whole kit with like a guidebook full of like, it comes with way too much
Still,
stuff. People throw everything else out and just hang
everything
on to
gets
the
thrown
TRX.
away. Yeah. 290. I would, no district, no offense to TRX. I would for sure make this myself.
You can make it yourself, or you can, I'm sure, get an off-brand
Oh,
one for
you
less
can,
than
yeah, you
100 bucks.
can get an off brand. So TRX is on here. I mean, simply put, it as advertised, it's a whole gym in a webbing system, more or less.
Random anecdote. Uh, TRX owns, I don't know if it's like patented or trademarked, I forget which, probably trademarked, the term suspension trainer and the term suspension training.
I don't think the Chinese care because
No,
I
they do not.
remember
That's
a
where all the
pod.
off-brand stuff comes from.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember a podcast with the TRX founder, and he was like, they got hosed when a bunch of off-brand stuff started. So anyway,
I think TRX like boomed and busted during
yeah,
COVID. I think it went through the roof early in COVID, and I think they like over invested, and then I think they declared bankruptcy actually.
some might say it's the GameStop of the fitness world. Maybe. Um, you've got, let's see, I'll throw one other one in here as we're talking. Bench, I'll do bench and box together, actually.
Hmm.
Now, I'm going to say this would be a non-adjustable bench. Typically, when you get into the adjustable bench domain, it gets a little bit more expensive. So just a flat bench and a box. I put these two together because in a lot of ways you can do the same things on both of them. Obviously, bench pressing on a box is going to be way more uncomfortable, but you can jump on a bench, you can jump on a box, you can do step ups on a bench, step ups on a box. I think in my mind, when I see a bench, it's almost a requirement because it opens up so many horizontal pressing options for you that you don't have access to if you are just on the floor. So I would probably point somebody towards a bench relatively early on in their equipment acquisition journey, but a box can kind of work just as well.
I will admit I don't currently have a bench in my garage gym. I used to have one. I had an adjustable bench.
You'll have a bigger chest if you get a bench.
That's probably true. Part of the reason I don't have one is because I suck at bench.
Okay. Wow.
So I sold it as I was moving, also because at the time, uh, the remnants of COVID were still around and prices were still high on gym equipment. I got it super, super cheap because it was a used piece of equipment I snagged at a wholesaler, which we'll talk about that strategy later.
Hmm.
Um, the University of South Carolina had just gotten a whole bunch of new gym equipment. So I got a University of South Carolina colored adjustable bench, very, very cheap.
Go Cox.
Now I currently don't have one. And you are right. I am limited in terms of my horizontal pressing in my gym.
Hmm.
Default for pressing movements right now is fuller press.
Mm.
Um, so I could do a lot more if I had a bench, but don't currently have one. I guess I'll throw out another piece of equipment. You could probably find like a drag only sled under $100, but what I'm thinking of when I say sled on this one is a sled you could both push and pull. Because I think you're leaving a lot on the table if you buy a sled you can only pull. Yes, you could get it a little bit cheaper. This actually brings up a point that we'll come back to at the end is like how much should you prioritize? Like if you're an army soldier, should you be buying specifically the ACFT equipment?
No.
Um, I'm going to suggest a strong no, because you're like artificially constraining your training options by buying like narrow utilization. Like Drew talked about multi-use equipment at the beginning of this, and you're forcing yourself into like non-multi-use stuff. So I would not constrain yourself to specifically the ACFT
Well,
equipment or whatever you're training for, like not buying specifically that equipment. Buy equipment you can train variously. Like you can do the most things with it. You'll still perform fine. You just want to give yourself as many options as possible.
you say that you have a hex bar on here.
I put it on there before we started talking so we could talk about the
Oh,
specificity thing.
oh, that's fair. Okay.
Because you
Uh,
can buy some pretty cheap, pretty decent hex bars. I think you could for sure get some acceptable ones under $500. Mostly put it on there as a point of conversation. I don't have one. I doubt you have one.
no, I don't have a hex bar. I hate hex bars. They're huge.
They are huge. They do take up a bunch of space. I think you would do fine. It depends on your situation. If you're like Army Reserve or National Guard really far away from a gym of any kind that would have one, and you're really worried about the hex bar deadlift on your ACFT, maybe it's worth the investment to you.
Don't be worried.
But for like multi-use purposes, you could absolutely do all your training on a barbell and show up and be fine.
Have you
You can
ever
do so
seen
much more.
somebody who can deadlift a lot of weight on a straight bar struggle with a hex bar?
No.
Right. I don't think, I mean, maybe that's a whole different discussion, but like, I mean, hex bars are fine. I get it. There's like, oh, it's like picking up a litter. Cool, great. But like, it is the epitome of a single use piece of equipment. My joke with hex bars is I have yet to see somebody figure out how to power clean one of those. So if anybody out there can power
I
clean a
have
hex bar, you've seen someone power clean a hex bar.
not with a lot of weight on it, but it
Okay, that's
can be
fair.
done.
I want to see a video of someone power cleaning a hex bar. I think it'd be hilarious.
I I have a lot of faith in the internet. I guarantee if I Google power clean hex
I'm
bar,
sure. Oh, I'm sure.
there's
For
going to be
sure.
somebody doing at least 200 pounds,
I'm
probably
sure.
300 pounds.
It's probably Juji Mufu out there.
Yeah, that's exactly what Gigi would do.
Um, a couple other things on here. I put on cheap barbell set simply because you can go to a Walmart or a Dick's Sporting Goods and get a 7 foot metal bar that has plates that go on the end of it. It's not going to be fantastic. You probably don't want to drop it, but it will allow you the ability to do barbell type movements. And they can be purchased for under $500. I would say that the amount of weight will probably vary. I mean, certainly the cheaper you go, the maybe the more weight, but cheaper quality, if that makes sense.
I
Um,
feel like I would be hunting for a way to spend the same amount of money on a used real
oh yeah,
barbell.
for sure. But we're not talking about used stuff yet, are we?
Okay, we'll get there.
Yeah. So they can be bought. And I would say as well, because I've kind of been in this space for a long time, and I remember the first, I think the first barbell I ever bought was like one of those short, stubby ones with some plastic weights filled with sand that was up in my
Yeah.
bedroom. And maybe I got it from Walmart. So from that point and up to now, if you go to these places, like a lot of these big box stores are getting some pretty legitimate stuff now, and
Hmm.
it's relatively cheap. Like you can go to Walmart right now and get bumper plates, and who would have thought, 10 years ago that'd be the case. So Don't think that that type of stuff is not available to you. You just might have to get creative with where you're looking.
My next one definitely falls into the accessory category. It's not gonna do anything for you on its own, but like depending on the flooring situation you have, a lot of people like to put down stall mats. I especially like it if I'm doing like single leg unilaterally kind of stuff, having like a reasonably grippy surface makes me feel a lot more confident than on like the smooth concrete that my garage otherwise is. So big fan of stall mats. I specifically would not buy my stall mats from a fitness company. I would buy stall mat. They're named stall mats because they're for horse stalls. Go to Tractor Supply, buy them there. You will pay a lot less for them, and they have a really generous military discount. I don't remember what it was, but I remember being surprised by it when I bought them. Um, Stall mats are like a little bit of a pain to relocate and stuff. My
Oh,
stall
they're a
mats
pain in
have
the ass.
they've been through like three moves for me now, and the movers always get this like grumpy face. Like I end up carrying them most of the time because rolled up stall mats, the movers are like, "What the f is this? How do I move this?"
It's like a fruit roll up that weighs 1,000 pounds. And you're
Yeah,
just
it's an odd object
flopping
to
in it.
carry.
Yeah, it's
It's a solid
bizarre.
it's a solid workout. Like anybody who's like used movers to move their stuff knows those guys are like insanely strong compared to how they look. Like they always outkick their coverage on that. But like odd objects like stall mats do throw them off real bad, and it's always fun to like at least be better than them at one thing strength wise.
Boom.
Um, Super useful.
I'll tell you just as a point of, I guess, a point of clarification. Don't you go to Tractor Supply to buy your stall mats. If you order them online, you're not going to know if they're smooth or
Yeah,
stubby.
yeah,
And I have made that mistake before where I get the textured surface when I wanted the smooth surface. So anyway, you put bike trainer on here. I'll actually agree with that because I have a bike trainer. You can get a decent bike trainer for between 100 to 500 bucks.
yeah.
Obviously, massive caveat there is you probably need a bike
Yes.
to sit on that bike trainer. But if endurance is something you're into, if you want a great way to rack up a bunch of miles without having to go out and cycle on the streets, if you live somewhere where that's not really an option, you can get a good bike trainer for 100 to 500 bucks. So if you had to buy one or two things on here, what would you choose?
In the 100 to 500
If you
category,
had 500 bucks, give me three things you would have in your home gym.
I mean, it's hard. Well, right now I don't have any nice sandbag things in my gym, but that's the next thing I would buy right now. So that's high on my list is I would get like one of those big 150, 200 pound sandbags and just ruin my life with it. Um, of the rest of the stuff we have on here, I think, well, this episode is coming out 1 week after Spencer's episode, and his answer to the deserted island question was he would have a sled.
Hmm.
So I'm going to say my other one. Maybe I'm biased because of that, but well, a sled's useless unless you have some plates to put on it, like weight to put on it.
See,
So that's tough. So I guess
I have my answer.
realistically, if I'm in the $500 range, I'm trying to find a used barbell and some plates, but
If I
that's
had
not the category we're in
$500,
right now.
well, if I had $500, I would accumulate, I would build my set of kettlebells.
Nice.
I would invest in a pull-up bar, either build it or I mean they have just standalone pull-up bars, and then
Hmm.
a bench. Done.
Interesting that bench is that early on your list.
Yeah, super early because you can do step ups, you can do step
Yeah.
downs, you can do step overs, you can do push-ups, yeah, all kinds of things. Um,
Yeah.
I think we value benches differently, mainly because I have one and you
Clearly.
don't. So,
Yep. Clearly.
okay, cool. So next category, we're getting upwards to 1,000, so 500 to 1,000. And I think this maybe this goes without saying, but like all of the things in the preceding categories are included in the $1,000 like
That's what
for
threw me off on the last category because I
sorry.
didn't factor in kettlebells
We're
because it was
adding
in
to
this
we're
category.
adding to our collection as we make more money. So
There's
upwards of a
there's a
thousand
good
dollars.
takeaway there though. There's a good takeaway there considering when we got to the 500 category, your like top item was still something that was from back in the
Oh
hundred
yeah.
dollar category, and I completely agree with it.
Yeah. I mean, if if you have no money, you're looking for essentials, and the essentials don't become non-essential just because you add more money.
Fair?
I just kind of made that up, and I think that that's actually really true. It
That sounded smart.
sounded really smart. Cool. Let's ride with that one. So $1,000. I'll lead this one off. I think the big thing that you're looking at now in this price range is squat racks or rigs, I guess maybe depending on your nomenclature, but you can get a really good. squat rack. And by squat rack, I mean vertical posts that can support a barbell. Oftentimes, there's some sort of pull-up attachment. Just structurally, it requires that kind of thing. Maybe it connects directly to your wall. Maybe it is freestanding into the ground. But I think once you get into four figures, you're definitely opening up the opportunity for a squat rack.
Are you, so we're up to $1,000 now, right? We're not
Hmm.
over $1,000 yet.
Up to a
Um,
thousand.
you can definitely in this category, Drew's definition of a squat rack did not include any like safety catches and things like that. So like just a squat stand, you might be able to get under $500. I think to get a pretty decent one that has actual like safety mechanisms built into it, because you're probably training alone if you're training in your garage. Now you have that opportunity here, and that changes things a lot, especially if
Yeah,
you're like
I'm looking
Drew
at
and want to bench.
the Rogue Fitness RML 390F flat foot monster light rack for $910. And that has pull-up bar and the ability to add safety whatever's.
Nice. Well, there's another elephant in the room if you're talking about a rack, because a rack's not useful
Oh, you
without
need
something else.
barbells. Yeah, there you
You
go.
do.
What a lead. Go for it.
Obviously going to be high on a lot of people's list, barbell and plates. You could, I mean, obviously you can't have a rack without a barbell, but you can have a barbell without a rack. You can do a lot, even if you have to get the bar off the floor to do it. And maybe that will fill in some gaps in your fitness if that's the case. You're probably not going to be doing any super heavy back squats unless you're able to like clean and then get over your head that barbell. So
Well,
you're
they
going to
have
be
that
limited
one
on the weight, but
I'm gonna forget the name of it, but you tilt the barbell up vertically and you get under it and you
Steinborn press, I think.
squat. Is it that? I know what's his face, that world's strongest man competitor, Martin
Yeah.
Lysick. He did like 500 pounds.
Did you say Lyshik? Isn't it
Lysick, Lysick,
Lises? Martin's Lises?
something like that. People know what we're
Yeah,
talking about.
sure. Big strong guy.
Yep.
If people are confused, you load up a barbell super heavy, you walk to one end of it, tilt that end up in the air, get the
Vertically.
barbell essentially vertical, wedge yourself in a very funky
Yep.
like 90-degree squat position, and
And
then
then leverage
like
yourself into the
lower the
bottom of the squat.
bar. Yeah, you like wedge
And
yourself in
up.
there and let the bar tip onto your back, and then squat that.
There you go.
Not something I'm probably gonna suggest most people do. I don't think you'll see a lot of Steinborn squats in long and strong.
Well, what people don't realize is that squat racks are a relatively recent invention, and I actually have
Hmm.
a book. It's like a training manual from the early 1900s, and the dude is doing leg presses with a barbell balanced on his feet. Like it's
Hmm.
sketchy as hell, but they didn't have.
Terrifying.
Yeah. So anyway,
Yeah, I mean, we could waste a whole episode if we go too far down the like what the point of a barbell is, but just the fact that they are like infinitely incrementally adjustable in
hmm
weight from 45 pounds or 35, depending on the bar you buy, up to, depending on how wide your plates are, a whole heck of a ton of weight. They're a pretty useful training tool for adjusting to almost any resistance, and the fact that they're perfectly balanced is really nice, et cetera, et cetera.
perfectly balanced as all things are. What is that from?
Isn't that Avengers?
Maybe.
The meme
Um,
is Thanos with the
yeah,
knife or
Thanos with the
whatever.
thing. Yeah. Um, a couple points on that with the barbells and the plates. I am partial to bumper plates, which are the rubber ones that you can
Uh-huh.
drop. I know a lot of people are going to be partial to the metal ones. I think the bumper plates are going to win out in terms of price, though. I think you can find bumper plates cheaper. I might be wrong on that. Um,
I will jump in briefly to say I don't know if you're buying new, but I will tell you it's easier to find used metal plates that are decent.
they last
Um,
longer
so
too.
so my answer, and this is what's going on in my garage gym downstairs, is I have primarily bumper plates, but I just snag one extra, maybe two extra sets of like metal 45s for
Right.
deadlifting specifically, take up less space on the bar.
They're
So you don't
loud as
end
hell,
if
though.
they're loud, but like my bumper plates are just a little bit bigger than my metal plates. So my metal
Oh
plates
yeah,
don't
nice.
hit the floor every time. And
That's nice.
like if you have the really thick bumper plates, you might fill up your bar deadlifting. So it's nice to have something thinner so you don't end up capping out like the width of your barbell for deadlifting.
Yeah, but
So just having like one of
it's
those is nice.
so good for the ego when you run out of space on the bar. The other thing I'll add to this is when you get into the $1,000 mark, and we mentioned this earlier with kind of maintaining some of the essentials from the earlier categories. Another option that you could be looking at here is just getting better quality
Yes.
versions of the earlier things. For example, you can get a bench for $100. You can get a nicer bench for $400. That doesn't always make a difference. In a lot of cases, though, it does. And what I mean by that is you can buy a cheap barbell and you have a barbell, and that's great, but it's not going to last very long, especially if it's in a gym, in a garage gym. You're talking about humidity, etc. So you might end up buying replacements for that bar when you could have just invested a little bit more in something nicer. And I think the same can be said for a lot of these things. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes it might make sense to get the cheapest item. Sometimes it might make sense to go a little bit more expensive. And I actually would think that a barbell, for example, I would probably go a little bit more expensive. A bench, I would probably go a little bit more expensive. Squat racks, I think historically, maybe pre-COVID, I would have told people to go more expensive, but I think you're starting to see a lot of knockoff versions of these premium squat racks becoming available, and they're usually pretty well built. I mean, there's not much to it other than tubular steel. So it's relatively easy to build a quality knockoff. And, you know, Rogue and companies like Rogue, I think at this point are kind of suffering from that Apple issue where you're kind of paying for the brand name in some sense. And you can buy some pretty decent knockoffs when you're looking at companies like Titan or
Mhm.
Rep Fitness, I think is another
Rep,
one.
Rage.
Yeah.
There are a few different ones. Yeah.
Yeah. So err on the side of pricier with things like barbells. You can probably cut some corners with things like squat racks, certainly things like kettlebells.
Depends on how strong you are. There's some freaky dudes out there on the internet that
Yeah.
definitely need a solid rack.
And if you're that strong to where that's going to matter, you're probably not looking to us for home
That's
gym
true.
fitness advice. So,
It's true. I
um,
will say it does feel like Drew is talking directly to me right now. I have been judged before on video content I have posted. Despite doing a lot of fitness things and liking fitness things, I am still rocking a pretty crappy squat rack that I bought used from a guy in Watertown, New York, outside Fort Drum, pre-COVID era. And he had bought it for only a few $100s and then never used it. And his wife was mad at him for it taking up space in the house. So he had to get rid of it fast. So I think I picked that thing up. It might have been less than 200 bucks.
see,
Um,
but it works.
it's not nice. It's not super duper stable, but it's definitely not unsafe. It just like wobbles a little bit if I hit it real hard or try and do muscle ups or something.
There you go.
Um, it gets the job done, and it did not cost me very much money. I am probably at the point where it would be worth upgrading just so that like this sounds stupid, but like Instagram content doesn't look so dumb. Like if I hang from it to do a pull up, I have to bend my legs because my feet will be on the floor. It's not that big.
Oh, yeah.
It makes me look big in the videos, so maybe I should keep it, but I
Yeah.
don't know.
Okay, so last category we'll do is the over $1,000. So the heavyweight category. No cap on this one. If you had as much money
No
as you
cap.
wanted, no cap. If you had as much money as you wanted, what would you look to purchase? Again, caveat here is that we're including all of the things previously mentioned. I think for me, and probably for you too, when you get into this sort of price point, what you're starting to look at is cardio options. Concept two comes to mind. So your rowers, your bike ergs, your ski ergs. Actually, of all of those, what is your favorite
I'd probably have to go with the one that's in my garage because I have a Concept 2 rower.
rower? People like rowers. I'm partial to the ski erg.
I was gonna say absolutely not to the ski erg.
Well, see, because I had a period of time where I was big on Jim Jones. For folks that can think back to the Jim Jones days, Mark Twight, they loved a ski erg. So I was born and
That is
raised
the last one I would possibly get.
in
I would
Colorado
have to
too.
have
You
like
think
a
of
I'd have to have like a 4 car garage with like more space than I can think of what to put in it before I bought a ski
no,
erg.
I think I'm
You
being
said in Colorado, like
just go
this a
ski, man. Just
ski
go
erg has nothing to
ski.
do with downhill skiing and it has barely anything to do with cross country skiing. It doesn't simulate skiing in any way.
But it gets you great shoulders, and that's what we're after.
The only
Um,
time I really use a ski erg other than like weird Metcons you programmed in Long and Strong or something is a warm up before upper body day.
there you go. See, where would you be without one?
I don't need a whole dedicated machine for my upper body warm up. I can do other stuff.
No, I will probably agree with you in that a rower is your best option. And I say that only because the concept to bike is fantastic, but I would bias towards an actual road bike so that you can go out and ride a bike. If that's not an option, then a Concept 2 bike is great. The reason why I keep saying Concept 2 is because I think the PM5 monitor on a Concept 2 is arguably the best monitor out there in terms of what you can do, setting up intervals, different time domains, different metrics. Some of the monitors on the Rogue, like the Rogue Echo bike, for example, kind of has a good monitor, but the PM5 is fantastic. So that's me getting really super nerdy with cardio equipment. Point being, once you get over 1,000 pounds, 1,000 pounds, $1,000, probably looking towards things like rowers, things like, I mean, if you want to get a ski erg, Concept 2 bike, Assault bike, I would throw in there
Yeah,
as
I
well.
was gonna say if you didn't mention it, you kind of breezed past Echo Bike slash
Breathe,
Assault
see,
Bike,
there you go. Fanned right by it.
slash a Schwinn Airdyne bike. You can choose
Classic.
any of them. I think if you're going for the old school vibe, you got to go Airdyne.
I think Echo is the worst one. I hate those things.
I
They're
don't
they're
really have that
huge.
strong an opinion. They are
They're
huge.
huge.
They feel like heavy and chunky.
Yeah, they're huge. And you
I don't
don't get
know.
as much free play as you do with an assault bike. The assault bike, it seems like you can kind of get into a cadence that allows you to relax a little bit. With the Echo, I feel like I'm
Mhm.
always pushing it. I will though, the assault bike is chain driven, the Echo is belt driven. So the assault bike is fine. However, all of the important mechanisms that have to do with moving the chain are directly below you where you sweat. So I have had to toss out and or fix more assault bikes because sweat gets into the mechanism and just ruins the chain. So keep that in mind when we're talking about longevity. There's a lot of there's a lot of moving parts to an assault bike, and you'll hear that pretty quickly if you hop on a used one. It just sounds like it's struggling to move.
You bring up a good point. We didn't put it on the notes for any of this. Yes, we had notes despite how freeform this sounds. We not very thorough notes, obviously.
We have a
Um,
list.
but we didn't talk about equipment maintenance at all.
Well,
And it's less of a big deal when you're talking about kettlebells. It starts to be a thing when you talk about barbells.
mhm.
But it's definitely a thing once you start about talking about cardio equipment. And
Yes.
we haven't yet dug into used equipment.
Hmm.
But if you're going to buy used cardio equipment and you're new to this space, it's worth taking some time, hopping on YouTube or Google or whatever, and learning how to recognize a piece of cardio equipment that has been treated well and maintained well, or one that is on its last legs. I got the rower that's in my garage used for a great price. I got it from like a gym had just upgraded all their equipment. They'd purchased that stuff through a wholesaler. The wholesaler got all the used equipment, had it in their warehouse, was selling it cheap. Um, Luckily, I had done some of my homework. I asked them like, hey, can I crack open these rowers and like look inside? And of the four they had, three I never ever would have bought because they were in terrible condition. But the one that I did end up buying was in fantastic condition. I don't know if it'd been used less or just maintained way better. But you got to know what you're looking for in terms of maintenance on some of those machines.
Oh, it's the old saying, never look a gift rower in the flywheel. So
I don't know what to say to that.
don't say nothing. What I will add though to this is just as a again, kind of a point of clarification, you will find in the fitness world a lot of the cardiovascular prescriptions when we talk about rowers, bikers, things like that. A lot of those are based off of people who have access to a concept too. So I say that because you can get these like water rowers and these different types. There's a lot of different versions of these things. But if you're buying this stuff in anticipation of following a program, pay attention to how that program programs, and then take a look at the piece of equipment that you're buying. For example, some rowers don't allow you to track calories; they just have meters. And if the program you're looking to follow is based on calories or things like that, you're gonna have you're gonna have a bad time. You can find conversions. That's great. I just in the past I know that I have run across people that have been frustrated because the thing that they bought doesn't allow them to track what it is that they want to track. But if it's just purely the movement that you're after, then yes, you can get different price points when we're starting to talk about cardio equipment.
Before we move on, you asked which I would get, and I said the rower because that's what I already own. But the next thing I would get, and I debated for a long time when I chose the rower between that and an assault bike. I think there's more versatility to an assault bike in terms of like
I would
a
go
great
assault
warm
bike.
up, great
Yeah.
high intensity. Despite what lots of people seem to believe, you can absolutely do low intensity on an assault
Yeah.
bike. You can do steady state on that thing just fine. But it also has like a unique ability to do some like really intense sprinting that you can't necessarily get that full effect on other cardio machines. Yeah, that I mean it's like kind of tied for first place for me.
No, I would probably default to Assault Bike, except for the maintenance piece.
That is why I don't
The
have it.
maintenance piece is hard. You've got GHD on here too. Maybe I'll disagree with you on this, but please.
You disagree that you wouldn't buy it?
I've seen a lot of GHDs become tables.
They do. So like only buy it if you
They're
plan to use it.
huge. Yeah, they're
Uh,
big and they serve very few, well, people are going to yell at me for that. Very few purposes. Ish.
I
Ish.
so I'll change it. I'll adjust. How about instead of a GHD, a reverse hyper? Because they do make folding reverse hypers, and I think
I'd
you can
get a
do a lot of things
GHD
there.
over a reverse hyper.
Because
Reverse
you can do
hyper
more
for
on it.
sure becomes a table. I
I
would get a Nordic hamstring curl attachment for your for your rack.
mean, I do have that.
Yeah, see,
Um,
I think you can do. I say that. I mean, when I picture GHD, I'm just picturing the massive thing. They have a lot of versions
sure,
of it
they're
that you
compact
can.
versions.
Yeah, and actually, you know what? Shout out COVID-19 because talk about something that just revolutionized the garage gym fitness equipment industry.
It's true.
Use I forget the name of the Sorinex rack that they created like super quick.
Oh,
Um,
the like bolt to the wall rack.
yeah, I had one of those. Those things were that was cool as hell.
Yeah.
So yeah, shout out. I mean, COVID-19 just doing big things in the space.
Thanks, COVID.
Yeah, thanks, COVID.
GHD's
Not
on there not because it's a
not
high priority
sponsored.
for me. I don't have a GHD in my garage. Um, the biggest issue with the GHD is not even necessarily the price; it's just the square footage.
It's huge.
Um, I would need a way bigger garage before I fit it in there.
Yeah, it's huge. So $1,000. I mean, sky's the limit there.
I'll add one.
Go ahead, and then I'll add mine.
Okay, this is not something I probably would have had high on my list even a few years ago. And it does depend on where you live and what your style is and how weather affects your motivation to get outside and train and stuff like that. I've never been a big treadmill guy until like this past winter. I did log a pretty solid amount of treadmill miles, um, especially if I'm doing like zone two running stuff that can get real boring. And it's nice, like if it's a crappy day out and I'm gonna do some zone two running, being able to like put a TV show on my phone. Now I don't own a treadmill. I have not gone out of my way to buy one. I don't think I would buy one. Again, it comes down to square footage for the biggest factor. But I have like I can run over to like a community gym that's like a block from my house and hop on a treadmill, and it is pretty nice for just not having weather to be an excuse. Or yeah, I use it. I used it more this past winter. I did.
When we um when we did the walkthrough of the house that we bought, there was a treadmill in the garage, and part of the negotiation buying the home was that we get to keep the treadmill, and they said sure. We showed up the day before we signed, and the treadmill was gone. Turns
Mm.
out the cleaning lady stole the treadmill. So we got reimbursed in cash, which actually ended up being great because, to your point, the square footage of those things is huge. So I still don't
That's
have
the
a
problem.
treadmill. Still don't have a treadmill, and I'm actually quite grateful for it. Okay, so we're as we do, we go long. That's fine. Let's
And
blow
strong.
through, yeah, and strong. Let's blow through some of the additional talking points. We've
Cool.
we've we've mentioned some of these already. We'll just dive a little bit deeper into them. I'll start by saying, like, in my mind, what trumps all of what we just talked about is Facebook Marketplace. So
100%.
if you're gonna look to buy stuff for your home gym and money is part of the conversation, which it normally is, get on Facebook Marketplace or any other, I don't know, Craigslist, is that still a thing?
I think it
Um,
exists.
maybe. So you will find a lot of stuff, a lot of used stuff. And honestly, sometimes you might find new stuff because as you mentioned, a lot of people buy things and decide they don't want to use it and it sits there and they end up selling it. Less so now than I think immediately after COVID. I remember post COVID, people were like, oh shit, I don't actually need all this stuff. And they sell it. So Facebook Marketplace is where I would go first before even buying anything new. And just, you know, recommendation there would be to try to find something relatively close to you so that you can go and see it, touch it, try it. Sight unseen can be a little bit sketchy, but yeah, Facebook Marketplace.
Cool. I'll combine two here. If gyms are closing down, they usually sell their equipment themselves. Sometimes you can find it on Facebook Marketplace. It's a bulk listing kind of thing. Sometimes you'll just see posters in the windows, whatever it is. That's a great way to snag up some stuff. If gyms aren't closing down, but they are replacing equipment, they tend to do that through fitness equipment wholesale companies that operate large warehouses of this stuff. And what happens is part of the deal is that the wholesaler removes the equipment they are replacing. Sometimes it's beat to shit and they got to get rid of it. But other times they just bring it back to their warehouse and sell it for a massively reduced price straight out of the warehouse. I will shout out a specific one. I no longer live on the East Coast, but when I was at Fort Jackson, Carolina Fitness Equipment was nearby. They operated a big warehouse out of Charlotte. Drew assures me they also have one in Raleigh. That sounds right since they just named themselves Carolina. But fantastic. Like I said, be smart about knowing how to recognize equipment that's been treated well or not treated well, because you'll find some equipment that was not maintained well. That's why they were getting rid of it. But you can find some screaming deals at those places. Really, really good stuff.
Similar to that, and I know Spencer mentioned this in his episode. He was lucky in that he lived right across the street from Rogue, but post competition, especially CrossFit, you will find a lot of equipment getting sold for cheap. I think more often than not, the caveat is that you have to get it yourself. They won't ship it to you. But if you do find that you are in the area of some major fitness competition, typically you can get that stuff at a huge discount. A lot of people know that, and so you'll be fighting with a lot of other people to get that stuff, but it is an option. I've never done that myself, but I know Spencer mentioned it, so we'll put it here.
Be ready
Um,
for like a gold rush on those things, though.
yeah.
Just a brief anecdote from just a couple weeks ago. This is also an apology to a couple people. Rogue posted on their page that they were like shutting down a training space that they had had, or like completely replacing all the equipment or something. I don't know what, but they had a picture of a ton of free stuff like at their headquarters. Like it was just for free to the first people who came there and took it. Um, I shared that post and was like, hey, if you're in Ohio, it might be worth checking out. By the time people messaged me, like even just a few minutes later, at most like an hour later, Rogue had already taken down their post that I had been sharing, which indicates to me that the equipment was gone within like half an hour or an hour.
Oh, for sure.
So you can't like you can't see the post and be like, oh, I'll go this weekend. Like
It's
the
gone.
stuff is gone. Yeah.
It's gone. One thing I'll add to this conversation about like bigger, bulkier stuff is when you buy gym equipment, you will very quickly find that shipping is very expensive because it's heavy. And oftentimes it will ship to you as freight, which is a whole
Hmm.
different deal. And when we talk about what we have in our home gyms, like I had pallets showing up. So it's like a freight shipment, which is a little bit different than the Amazon dude dropping off a book at your front door. So factor that in, especially when we're talking about budget. All of the things we talked about here was just kind of sticker price, didn't include shipping and handling. Most major equipment manufacturers or I guess distributors will include like free shipping after a certain dollar value. But if you're just looking to collect a couple of kettlebells or something like that, bear in mind that it could become expensive to ship it.
I'll shout out a military specific strategy that worked for me. I don't know if Claire listens to the episodes on this podcast, but if you happen to have a friend who happens to be PCSing across the country to where you are going to be, and you can ask them to make a stop in Ohio and pick up your stuff, you can get Rogue equipment much cheaper that way. Thanks, Claire, for
Thanks,
picking up
Claire.
my barbell. And no, I think I had the barbell shipped because it wouldn't fit in the car, but she picked up a bunch of plates for me as she was PCSing. I guess that would be 2-4 drum, super clutch, really, really helpful. And then you can let that person claim them on their Diddy Move weight, so they at least get compensated for it.
Boom. Everyone wins, except for the movers. DIY stuff, we've mentioned this kind of throughout, but there's a lot of things you can make yourself. And again, shout out COVID. A lot of creative home gym aficionados coming up with some insane stuff. I've seen entire squat racks built out of 2x4s. I don't necessarily recommend that because it's dangerous, but we've got a link here. End of Three Fitness has a DIY corner. We'll put that in the show notes. A quick Google search. I mean, people DIY pretty much anything these days. I myself, I mentioned the rings. I've also DIY'd TRXs, DIY'd pull-up bars. You can even DIY. I think Tim Ferriss actually in one of his books has like a DIY T-handle kettlebell thing. So
Hmm.
if you have weight plates, you can essentially rig up some plumbing pipe in a T shape with a
I didn't
flange.
mention I didn't even mention parallettes earlier. That's something you can
Yeah,
DIY pretty
parallettes.
easily
Yeah.
that people do all the time from Home Depot. Pretty good
Hmm.
piece of home gym equipment if you're gonna try and work in some gymnasticsy stuff.
Yeah. So I guess take home there would just be if you're curious, type in whatever piece of fitness equipment you're after and put the letters DIY after it, and I guarantee you'll find, if not something practical, something entertaining. Um, you want to hit recovery equipment?
I don't. I want you to hit recovery equipment because I don't know what you're gonna say about it.
So I put recovery equipment on here just because it's kind of its own market now. And by recovery equipment, I mean fancy balls, foam rollers, vibrating guns, things like that. We've talked about this on other episodes. Like they're cool, but they're
I
not,
simply would not spend the money.
yeah, they're not worth it.
No.
If you have a reciprocating saw, just put a lacrosse ball on the end of it, and then you've got yourself a vibrating gun. You're good to go. You
I'll
can,
I'll I'll go full cards on the table and admit what recovery equipment I do have.
please.
Um, I have like a half length foam roller, decent one. Um, I have a lacrosse ball if that counts as recovery equipment.
Sure.
Um, and the only other thing I have that would be in the category of recovery equipment is it's called an R3 roll recovery. It's like skateboard wheels on like a spring-loaded thing that can smash down, like it squeezes together. So you can like open it up, put it on your leg, and it'll squeeze together on your leg. Um, I honestly don't use it very often. It's funny timing that we're talking about this right now. Didn't know we were even going to talk about recovery equipment on this episode. I got it because years ago, last time I lived in Colorado, my platoon sergeant let me borrow one when I was heading off to run the Ragnar Ultra, so like 30 miles of running in stages. And it was great between stages of that run. It felt fantastic. I mean, it comes back to like whether you believe that stuff works or just feels good, whatever. Um, but I ended up buying my own, and I'm actually headed off to do the Ragnar again tomorrow, and I will probably pack it.
There you go. I have a lot of recovery stuff from brands that I won't mention because they were given to me for free. I will tell you that most of them are in a closet with spider webs now. But yeah, I mean, if you're in, I guess the over $1,000 category, sure, maybe get some of these things because they are expensive, but it's
Please
probably the
don't buy a
last thing.
home ice bath cold plunge thing. Don't spend it. It's all
I
over
was
Instagram.
just,
I know. Don't
I
buy it.
was just about to do it, mostly because all the gurus I follow seem to like that kind of thing.
Like
Um,
you were just about to talk about it. You were just about to buy
I've been
an
looking
ice
at
bath.
them or a sauna. I think a sauna would be cool.
I would buy a sauna way before I buy an ice bath.
Sauna. Um, yeah, stick to barbells. You know what? The official position of Mops and Mo's, the best recovery equipment you could buy is your bed.
There you go.
And you
Agreed.
already have one of those. Before
Mhm.
we wrap, walk me through your home gym.
In my home gym, three stall
Garage,
mats.
basement, what are we talking
It,
about?
it is garage. Um, it is three stall mats, a squat rack, a barbell, plates, as mentioned before. I have a couple 45-pound metal plates, but everything else is bumper. Um, I have, I think, three different strengths of bands. I have a chainless dip belt kind of thing for weighted pull-ups, weighted dips. I do have a like dip bar attachment that attaches to the squat rack. I think I have four or five kettlebells, range of weights, and one weight. I have a pair of them. Maybe two weights. I have pairs of them. I forget. Um, my instead of a plyo box, my step up thing is my Yeti cooler. Um, then I have the Sorinex glute ham roller thing. I have a jump rope. I have a pair of rings, but nowhere to put them at my current home, so they are sad in the corner. I'm trying to think. There's probably a couple of things I'm forgetting. I do, and this is going to spark some opinions from Drew probably. I have a Bosu ball in there.
I think
I
I do
mostly
too,
have
actually.
I mostly have that because of a ACL rehab. It was a big deal during that rehab. It was very nice to have at home. Not used as much recently, and I could go off about Bosu balls and strength coaches, the way they talk about them and stuff. I do think they have utility. I just don't.
You talking about the boat, like the half ball or the
Half
whole
ball.
ball?
Yep.
Half ball.
Half
Okay.
ball.
Yeah, half ball. I don't have one of those.
Um,
I have the whole ball.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else I'm free. I have one pair of dumbbells.
Mm.
Um, they're not the adjustable kind. It's just a pair of 25-pound dumbbells. I think I happened to get them really cheap at one point. I forget why I have them, but they're kind of handy for like CrossFit, Metcon kind of stuff. Um, and I have those weird climbing training holds that you
Oh
can
yeah.
hang off of stuff. I have a pair of those that hang off of my squat rack, and I have a TRX that also hangs off of my squat rack. And I
Nice.
think, oh, and we forgot the big one. I have a Concept 2 rower in there as well. I think that is the grand total of my garage gym.
I have a two-car garage. One half is a wood shop. The other half is a gym. So most of the gym stuff is covered in sawdust and wood shavings, which
That
is
happened in my
fine.
last garage. It was a pain.
Yeah. So when I sold my last house, bought this house, I was able to outfit a gym probably to a greater extent than I would normally. So there's a little asterisk to this, but horse stall mats because it's concrete floor. I didn't want to bust it up. A full rack of dumbbells, I think like fives up to 75s. And then I got these cheap Amazon dumbbell like racks that are actually fantastic. So they're arranged, they're not just sitting on the floor. One of those Rogue half racks that has the pull-up bar and then sort of the safety bars, not super deep though. I think it's only 3 or 4 feet deep. That I did bolt that to the floor just because I didn't want to flip over. Barbells. I got two barbells, male and a female barbell, and then a bunch of bumper plates from some knockoff company, and then some bumper plate vertical storage stuff that I stole from somewhere at some point. Dip bar attachment, just because I thought it was cool. Rings as well. My rings are hanging from the pull-up bar. My ceilings in my garage are like 6 inches above the rack. So like when I do pull-ups, if I'm not paying attention, I'll hit my face.
You overhead
Um,
press in there?
I can overhead press if I take care to avoid the garage
Space it between the
door.
beams? Yeah.
No, I don't have beams, but the garage door
Okay.
mechanism,
Yeah.
which looks like it's from like the 1920s. So I'm a little scared of it. But I have a Concept 2 bike, which is nice for warming up, but I also have a road bike on a trainer, so I don't necessarily need it. Um, it is what it is. I have a box that doesn't really get used. Kettlebells, I have a lot of kettlebells. And then one we didn't mention is a whiteboard. I have a whiteboard on my wall.
I also have a whiteboard in my
Yeah,
garage.
whiteboard
Yep.
is clutch. Got a little TV. And the only TV in my house actually is in my garage gym.
I have a TV in my garage. It's not plugged in.
I don't use mine. It's just there because I thought it looked cool. And I think that's everything. Relatively minimal. I don't think you need that much. Uh, and yeah, I designed all my stuff around just sort of the hybrid type of thing that I like to do.
I'm
So
gonna sling a crazy one at you.
please,
Um, I bought a cheap Amazon version, and I would not recommend other people do that because it's not nearly as good. You ever train on a slide board?
is that
Like the
that
kind of things you
nerdy
see them
thing
in
where you're like
you see them in
speed
physical therapy
skater?
clinics where you
Yeah.
like put the socks over your shoes and slide back and forth.
Yeah, I don't have one of those.
I freaking love those things. I don't know why, but like adductor, abductor stuff, like symmetry stuff, hip mobility stuff, you could do
You-
so much with those.
You're
I might
telling
buy
me
a fancy one.
you're telling me you have a slide board before you have a bench?
Well, the one I have is like a rollout thing that
Okay.
it was cheap and sits in the corner, and I figured it was cheap enough that even though I knew it would probably suck, I would still try it. And I
Hmm.
used it a little bit, but you had to like weight it down with a lot of stuff for it to not move around the floor, and it doesn't slide as well. But they make the fancy ones for like physical therapy clinics that fold in half, and you can just lean them up against the wall. Yeah, I should
Hmm.
probably get a bench before I got one of those, but it's on my list. I like them.
That's
And I think
fair.
there's some like carryover to skiing from it. I
Oh,
don't
but not a
know.
ski erg.
It's like, have you ever skied?
Yes.
The only time a ski erg is relevant to skiing is if you are a downhill skier stuck on a catwalk. That's the sole occasion where the motion you are about to do is
Yeah,
actually
and
what a ski erg is.
you're gonna feel real grateful for your ski erg training when you're stuck there. So yeah, like we said at the top, a lot of people probably have a lot of different opinions about a lot of these types of things. The setup for your individual gym can and should be based upon what you actually want to train for. Don't just buy everything you see on somebody's Instagram and then realize like, oh shit, I like cycling. I don't have anything here to cycle. So yeah, build it out accordingly, but hopefully this gave some folks some idea of where they could start at different price points. We'll link as many things as we can in the show notes, all the DIY stuff we mentioned, and any closing comments?
Once you get all the equipment, if you're looking for a cool program to
Oh
use in
yeah,
your garage gym,
yeah, long and
long and
strong,
strong.
long and strong. Yeah, if you guys want to do what we're doing, hop on the website, go to the long and strong link, and join the Let Dark Nation.
Boom.
Hey Alex, let's cover our ass real quick.
Oh, great idea, Drew. All right, guys. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode. Before you go, please rate and review the pod on the listening platform of your choice. You can also visit us on our website at www.mopsinmos.com. That's mops, the letter N, mos.com. You can check out the library of podcast episodes, our latest blog entries, any helpful resources, and also sign up for our newsletter.
Drew nailed it. Just to underline a couple of things, the podcast entries have in-depth show notes on the website. So if you missed anything or you want to read any of the research we talk about, it is all there. You can, at the bottom of the website, sign up with your email and receive future updates from us. The blog posts go a little bit more in depth in kind of written form on a couple of topics we get questions about all the time. But most importantly, I just want to ask all you guys, our best way the word gets out is absolutely word of mouth. So tell your friends, tell the people you work with, anybody you think would find it useful. Thanks for spreading the word.
If you have any questions or comments, feel free to shoot us an email at either Drew or Alex at mopsinmos.com.
Or there's a contact form on the website.